Being joined by students from the St. George's University, again Chelsea Hoenes, Marina, Jabsky, and Jordan Resnick, and they're here to discuss the topic, the sickness you can call it, hypertension. Good morning.
Good morning.
And how are thou?
We are good.
Well, bright and early.
Right, and how long have you been at the SGU?
Well, we're all first-time students, so about 2 months now.
Right.
Yeah.
Enjoying Grenada?
Yes.
Love Grenada.
Yes, it's
Beautiful,
absolutely
beautiful.
Where are you coming from?
Idaho, it's a really freezing cold part of America.
Say, I'm from New York, so it's snowing where I'm from.
Virginia, so it's also very cold.
Gotcha. So, liking Grenada, what you've seen, what touches you so much in Grenada?
Well, I really like the relaxed lifestyle down here. Americans probably have higher rates of hypertension, you'll find out later.
Right.
But Grenadians have a very relaxed culture. I like that.
Anywhere I go, I'm always in the back because I'm so relaxed. I'm walking in my own time,
Right.
and everyone leaves me, you know.
Right.
Especially in England and New York, it's so busy.
Right.
I'm relaxed. I'm cool.
Helps in the School of Medicine.
Yeah, definitely.
Right, hypertension, and I guess you chosen this as your portfolio.
Well, it's actually, it's because it's such a huge issue. The World Health Organization actually dedicated this year's World Health Day to hypertension, which is April 7th.
Okay.
And so it's because it's such a widespread disease and has such a great impact on a variety of people. It's very important to discuss it, talk about it.
Right. What is it? What is hypertension anyway?
Well, hypertension is quite simply chronic high blood pressure. So if you were to go to the doctor, he's gonna, put a cuff around your arm, and he's gonna read it, and he's gonna say to you two numbers. It'll either be something healthy, which would be below 140/90, or anything 140/90 or above is considered hypertension. So what that reading really means is it's talking about the pressure of blood as it flows through your arteries. So when your heart contracts, that's called your systolic pressure, and that would be the top number, so that would be your 140. And then the minimum relaxation phase is called the diastolic. That's, there's less pressure in your arteries. And anyway, 120/80 would be considered a normal reading. And why it's so important is hypertension is actually the 5th leading cause of death here in Grenada, and worldwide it accounts for 13% of the deaths.
So how does one know? Does it has to be a sustained sort of reading? How does one know that he has hypertension, high blood pressure, for example?
Well, when you go to the doctor and he measures your blood pressure, you should go several times. So between 3 and 6 times in a month you would go, and if all those readings are
You
elevated,
must go that often.
It doesn't have to be up to 6, but yeah, you do have to go just so you can get a consistent reading, especially because there is such a thing called as white coat hypertension, which is a lot of people when they go to the doctor, they already feel nervous, and that spikes up your blood pressure. So you could be perfectly healthy, but just from the tension and stress of being at the doctor's.
I'd be scared.
Yeah, exactly, and it'll change your reading.
Right,
So you gotta go to confirm.
And it chooses no one. Anyone may be affected. Who's affected, really?
Right. Well, in particular, Grenadians are affected by hypertension, but it is a leading cardiovascular disease, which is often caused by hypertension, is the leading cause of death in the world today. But Grenadians are at a particular risk because there is a very, the diet here is carb heavy. There's a high intake of sodium, and all of these things can spike your blood pressure over time. And uncontrolled hypertension is really what causes cardiovascular disease, obesity, diabetes, and that's why it's so important to go regularly to your doctor to get blood pressure readings.
Uncontrolled hypertension.
Right.
Yes, when you
Spread out. Elaborate on this for me. Uncontrolled.
Right.
Yeah, so uncontrolled hypertension would be when your 140/90 reading, it stays that way or it continues to go up. And if it goes high enough to where it says 180/110, that's considered an emergency, and they'll actually put you in the hospital, the intensive care unit for that.
In trouble.
Yeah, it's potentially life-threatening at that point, yeah.
Have you been able to analyze the impact of hypertension in Grenada so far? Have you?
Yes, so it's actually, like I said, it's the 5th leading cause of death, but it's also worldwide, it's the leading risk factor for the leading cause of death, which Chelsea will be talking about here momentarily, which is cardiovascular disease, and that's the #1 killer in Grenada as well.
Yes.
Tell me about it.
Well, cardiovascular disease. So one of the leading causes of cardiovascular disease is something that's called left ventricular hypertrophy. It's a big word, but so as you're increasing pressure, blood pressure through your veins and through your arteries, it's also your heart is going to have to that somehow. What's going to happen is the tissue around your heart and your artery walls are going to thicken. It's going to become less elastic. Your heart's going to have to work harder to accommodate that blood flow. So your heart muscle is eventually just going to get tired, and you want to reduce the amount of effort that your heart has to exert to pump. So if your heart gets very tired, it might result in cardiac arrest, and that is what the huge problem is. Also, if your arterial walls are thickening and your blood vessels are thickening to accommodate the increased volume of blood, then if you have any kind of particulate matter that's traversing your bloodstream, blood clots, for example, or any kind of fatty tissue, it's not going to be able to pass as easily through your walls of your blood vessels, and so that might clog and can cause stroke.
What about conditions related to it? Hypertension?
Well, a really important condition that's relating to hypertension is actually obesity. And worldwide, over the last 30 years, obesity rates in pretty much every country has doubled. Looking at the Grenadian statistics, women are at a particularly high risk for obesity. It's now a little over 30% of women in Grenada are obese, and men are around 20%. But the interesting thing is as your body weight scales up, so does your chance of hypertension. So statistically speaking, you should see that as you get larger, your hypertension goes up. Looking at the flip side of that, if you were to lose 1 kilogram of body weight, you can expect to lose 1 point off your reading as well. So there is a direct correlation between weight loss and weight gain and hypertension. Also, though, an important part of being able to manage obesity would be able just to look at yourself and determine, do I actually have it? And there's a couple ways to do that. The first one would be to look up a chart online called a BMI, and that stands for Body Mass Index. And this is a chart that accounts for men and women, and it just takes a look at your height and your weight. Unfortunately, it does not account for it doesn't account for musculature. So if you're really muscular individual like Arnold Schwarzenegger, it's a bodybuilder.
Or like
it's going to say that you're
like you.
No, not like me, not like me. It's gonna say that you're morbidly obese. I actually looked up the world's leading bodybuilder, Ronnie Coleman, is 41% BMI, and that puts him as morbidly obese. So he should have like crazy hypertension, but he doesn't. And then secondly, a more accurate measure and probably easier to do would just be to take the circumference of your waist with a tape measure and compare that to your height. If your waist is more than half of your height, then that's a bad sign and you're probably at risk for hypertension.
What about the risk factors and complications of it, risk factors?
Well, there are, for hypertension, there are a huge amount of risk factors because it affects so many systems. It'll, as the blood pressure increases, it can damage the nerves in your eyes. It'll eventually lead to blindness, hearing loss. Again, like Chelsea, a variety of heart problems. It can lead to diabetes, which I'll talk about a little bit more in detail. It can ultimately lead to stroke and to cardiac arrest and to death.
What about the effect on pregnant women, for example?
Well, pregnant women are at a higher risk for what a condition called preeclampsia. And what happens is preeclampsia is a very sudden, very high spike in blood pressure. And it's very often asymptomatic, which means that there are no other signs that a woman will have preeclampsia. So it's very, very important to monitor the pressure with the doctor, because what can happen as a result is if the woman's blood pressure spikes very high, that affects the baby, because now the baby is getting less pressure, which less blood flow, which means less oxygen, which can lead to a lot of developmental issues. Also, for pregnant women with hypertension, they're at a higher risk for gestational diabetes, which can also increase the mother's risk of developing type 2 diabetes later in life, as well as increase the baby's risk of obesity later in life and of developing type 2 diabetes.
Right, this all happened right here in the GIS Spice Morning, looking at the sickness, the issue, hypertension, and we're talking to students of the St. George University, Chelsea Hoenes, Marina, Jabsky, and Jordan Resnick. Keep it right here. We'll come back and continue talking with the students in a moment. Don't you? Keep it right here in the GIS Spice Morning for Monday, March 11th. We take a break and we come right back.
Hi, I am Junior Murray. Let's keep our athletes and sports clean. No dope in sports.
Right, it's 18 minutes gone past the hour. Continuing to look at the sickness, the issue, hypertension, and continuing our dialogue with students of the St. George University. And we were talking about the risk factor, and when you break, you were talking about indicating that there's so many more things to talk about the risk factor.
Right. There are so many things that hypertension can preclude too, honestly. But the main risk, the problem with hypertension is that oftentimes you can seriously reduce your risk. You can prevent yourself from getting hypertension, which is the best kind of medicine, honestly. You can really decrease your alcohol content, and don't smoke. Those are things that can really spike your hypertension risk substantially. But also eat a diet that's very low in sodium. You don't want to be eating fast food very often. You want to decrease your carb and sugar intake, and just eat eat healthy foods. Live a very active lifestyle. Go swimming. It is very beautiful on the island. And engage in community activities, for example. All of these things are going to reduce your risk for hypertension.
And now we're talking about the prevention of hypertension and other things you can do. I jog every morning, try to keep fit.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
very good.
Right.
And physical activity is one of the best prevention methods for hypertension, as well as obesity, cardiovascular disease, hypertension, diabetes. These are all issues that are so interlinked, and when you reduce the risk of one, you reduce the risk of another. So physical activity would be one of the best ways, because it really moves you across the board. High stress is a huge risk factor, so once you exercise, you also lower your stress levels,
Right.
as well as maintaining healthy diet. One of the issues with hypertension is it affects the aging population at a higher rate, and people who lead a sedentary lifestyle. So once you start moving, it'll really help decrease your stress risks across the board.
Right.
good exercise, physical, good diet,
Right.
other prescriptions.
Yeah, there are some prescriptions. It's important to note that the Afro-Caribbean population is, for reasons that's not completely known, they're actually at a higher risk of developing hypertension. And there's four main classes of drugs. There's ACE inhibitors, beta blockers, calcium channel blockers, and diuretics. And for the Afro-Caribbean population, it's been shown that calcium channel blockers actually work the best. But we can't stress enough how important it is to take preventive measures, because once you start hypertensive drugs, you need to stay on them for the rest of your life, and that could be hard to do. So it all comes back to prevention. And I know that when somebody starts a workout routine and they start a diet, they tend to do things that aren't reasonable for long term. So
Aren't reasonable.
So if I were to be diagnosed with hypertension, for instance, I would say, oh no, I'm scared. I'm going to go work out 5 times, 6 times a week for like 4 hours a day.
So you overdo it.
It's overdoing it, exactly. And the number one exercise I would recommend to people around the island, especially because we're talking about obesity and it scales upward with age, is low impact exercises like swimming or walking briskly, not powerlifting or things like that. Could be bad for your body.
There's no need to.
And running.
Running would be a good one, but even and we talk about how hypertension affects the aging population, and it might be very difficult for people who are older, who might have more muscle difficulties, bone difficulties, for them to do a lot of things like running. So swimming would be a much gentler.
And you need to that weight.
Right.
You know, some people are obese. They're big and they're trying to lose weight. They walk in every day. And they're not losing any weight.
3 or 4 times a week for.
They're walking every day, and you cannot see the impact.
But there's also some dietary tricks that, even if you're not going to per se change your diet too much, if you were to eat 5 smaller meals as opposed to 2 really large meals throughout the day, your body will it'll spike your metabolism. So your body's naturally going to become more efficient at burning those calories, and you lose weight. And just drink more water and less soda, simple things like that, and just don't put quite as much sugar. Sugar and salt on your meals, and then you should see decreases in hypertension.
And it's important to know there are also some genetic predispositions. Some people are more likely to be obese if they have a family history of obesity, of hypertension, of cardiovascular disease, of diabetes. It will definitely be harder for them to maintain their weight, but that's exactly why you want to start young, because even though hypertension affects the aging population at a predominantly more rate, 1 in 10 people who have hypertension are in their 20s and 30s. And that's really the time that you want to catch it before it develops into a bigger issue, because once you're diagnosed with hypertension, then it already leads to all these chronic conditions. With chronic diseases, it's always easier and cheaper to prevent them than to treat them once you already have them.
You diagnosed, and how does one feel? How does one know?
Well, there are a couple symptoms. As soon as you stand up, if you have a lot of dizziness, if you feel flushed, if you have a tingling sensation in your fingers or toes. Tingling sensation, right, yes. And that might even preclude something like diabetes.
Diabetes
you can
also.
have nerve damage in the extremities, and as Marina said before, if you have a lot of nerve damage on your toes or your hands, it might lead to gangrene and potentially amputation.
Nerve damage. What would
Yes.
cause nerve damage, for example?
Diabetes is a huge precursor for nerve damage. Like Chelsea mentioned, the tingling in the tips of your fingers and toes, it will spread through your system. So as it spreads up, it might cause something like gangrene, as the nerves in your arms, your limbs will
Gangrene, is that?
gangrene
Yeah?
can. Yeah, well, what
Okay.
happens is because you start losing feeling, and especially with diabetes, you're more likely to have chronic infections and
Okay.
infections that heal slower or not at all, and that's how you will develop gangrene. And the problem with nerve damage is that it'll spread through your body, so it'll spread through your organs. If it spreads to your digestive systems, it'll cause all manner of malabsorptive disorders, vomiting, diarrhea, constipation. It can spread even further it can cause erectile dysfunction in men. It can cause kidney problems, which is a huge issue, especially in the
Yeah.
Caribbean, because if it gets to kidney failure and it necessitates either dialysis or kidney transplant, there's a very limited access in the Caribbean to dialysis machines, and can be fatal.
So when should one see a doctor then?
Well, you should see a doctor, first of all, if you're extremely overweight and you start having pain in the back of your head. That's a real telltale sign. Is actually the
Back of
number
your
one
head?
sign. Yeah,
Okay.
it's a headache actually towards the back of your head. So if you go see your doctor and he gives you a kind of high reading, I wouldn't be too panicked just yet, because it might be that white coat hypertension. You're just nervous that you're actually seeing the doctor. Go back in a week, get your blood pressure taken elsewhere. Maybe I've heard that there's a couple pharmacies around here that may be able to do it for you.
And community centers also.
Community centers, yeah.
Right.
And and then go back and see if you have the hypertension at that point.
But also, you should also just see your doctor regularly, or again, go to community health centers. Visit regularly, especially if you know that you do have some of the risk factors, genetic predisposition. If the race is an issue, as you get older in age, you should visit medical professionals more and more often.
Yeah. What makes it so dangerous is that it actually is usually asymptomatic. So, determining, I feel sick today is kind of hard. So that's why once you get that reading from the doctor, that's when you should go from there.
It's costly to treat.
Well, it's always cheaper to prevent because once you start drug treatment, you are dependent on that, and you have to. It's going to be something you'll be paying for the rest of your life, and especially with hypertension, because, and we can't stress this enough, but because it's an underlying cause for so many other chronic diseases, once you start treatment for just treating hypertension, you're also treating cardiovascular disease, you're treating diabetes, and all those medicines, they really, really pile up. So it's so important to prevent those diseases from happening before you have to start paying medication.
Preventive
Preventative
That's the key.
medicine. That's where you win.
Give me a format for that.
Well, as we've mentioned, for prevention, the 3 top measures to prevent hypertension are diet limiting sodium intake, increasing potassium intake, because potassium will balance out the sodium, increasing your daily activity. If you don't have to go to the gym, or you don't have to do an hour of hardcore physical activity. It can be something so simple as walking to the grocery store instead of driving. And also lowering your stress, because stress is another one of those global factors, and it will cause your blood pressure to spike. It'll cause extra tension in your body. So you want to really cover all 3 of those, and once you decrease your stress, increase your physical activity, and monitor your diet, you're much more likely to prevent all these chronic conditions.
Yeah. Is this a project you are undertaking, a project of this hypertension?
Well, I mean, we come on behalf of SGU, but we just really wanted to talk about the importance of hypertension specifically in the Caribbean. We are here class, but I mean, the World Health Organization has played such a huge part in public health in the Caribbean, and it is going to be World Health Day coming up on April 7th, and since hypertension is such a global issue, it's important to talk about.
1 in 3 people worldwide do suffer from hypertension.
Yes.
So it's a large
part. That's 30% of the world's population.
It's large, it's expensive, and it's entirely
and it could be prevented. You say it could be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I know we harp on lifestyle choices, and it's difficult to change your lifestyle, especially if it's habit, especially as you're older. And that's why, as Jordan was saying, it's so important to make manageable goals instead of saying I'm going to spend 5 hours every day doing a workout. Half an hour. It's not, take small steps and increments, and as you work that into your habit, you can take on more.
Tell you, when you get used to half an hour, you go for 40 minutes. You want to go for 40 minutes.
Yeah,
your body starts
you want to scale it up.
Yeah.
They call that an endorphin rush. So after you do your workout, you feel really good.
Right.
So then you want to, in order to keep getting that endorphin rush, you want to work out for longer and harder.
Exactly.
And you feel good.
Yes.
And that also lowers your stress as you work out more. It lowers the stress in your body, which also is a risk factor for hypertension. So you're essentially doing 2 things at once.
Right. And before you all run out this morning, a little more about the personalities, Mr. Resnick. Yes.
So a little bit more about myself.
Yes, and your studies.
So I'm currently a student of the public health department at SGU, and I'm looking to transition into medicine as well. I am also a certified personal trainer, and that's something I do back home. And yeah, hypertension. Those obviously that's why I talked about the weight working out and the obesity aspects as well.
And Chelsea?
That's me. Yes, we're all in the same class, and we all are going to transition into medicine shortly. We'll have aspirations to become a physician. And so, but why public health is so important to us is because you're treating communities. You're not just going into an exam room and treating one person on a case-by-case basis. You want to treat an entire community of people all at once. So it's very efficient, and the best way to do that is through prevention.
Marina?
Well, I'm a student of the MPH program, and hypertension is actually something that's a little bit close to home for me because I have had a family history of some of my grandparents have had complications from high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and so I find that it's so important to start locally and also increase that knowledge and have a global impact for diseases that are essentially preventable.
Yeah. Well, you were very, very enlightened this morning. Thank you so much, and wish you all the best with your studies. Right. Speaking there to students of the St. George's University, Chelsea Hoenes, Marina Jabsky, and Jordan Resnick. Yeah, you heard about the sickness, hypertension, and very important, it can be prevented. Got to take those moves, make those moves to ensure that you prevent yourself from getting hypertension.